Three orphaned triplets gave a Christmas present to a billionaire, and upon opening it, he realized something that made him cry like never before. The cold December wind blew through the poorly sealed windows of Hope Orphanage, carrying snowflakes and the distant sound of jingling bells. In the small, unworn-out dormitory, three identical pairs of eyes opened simultaneously, as if responding to a silent call. Ethan, the oldest by a mere 2 minutes, was the first to get up. His tousled brown hair and bright green eyes contrasted with the faded grey walls. "Emma, Evan, wake up! It's Christmas Eve!" he whispered, his voice barely able to contain his excitement. Emma, the middle one, rubbed her sleepy eyes. "But Ethan, you know we don't have any presents this year," she murmured, a touch of sadness in her gentle voice. Evan, the youngest by 3 minutes, was already on his feet, his adventurous spirit pulsing. "Who needs presents when we have each other?" he declared, a mischievous grin lighting up his freckled face. The 7-year-old triplets were inseparable, united not only by blood, but by a bond forged through years of hardship. Orphans since infancy, they were all each other had in the cold, often cruel world of the orphanage. While the other children still slept, the three got dressed in silence, layering donated clothes to fight the biting chill. Their socks had holes, their shoes were worn, but their spirits remained unshakable. "Let's go outside," Ethan suggested, always the leader. "Maybe we can find something special for Christmas this year." Slipping through the quiet hallways, the triplets reached the snow-covered courtyard. The sky was still dark, dotted with stars that seemed to wink just for them. It was then that Emma spotted something buried in the snow. "Look!" she exclaimed, pointing to a corner of the courtyard. Running over, she dug out a crumpled, damp newspaper. "Be careful, Emma," Evan warned, always the protector. "It might be dirty." Ignoring the warning, Emma opened the soaked newspaper. On the front page, a photograph caught their attention. It was an imposing mansion, larger than any house they had ever seen. But it wasn't the mansion that fascinated them. It was the man pictured beside it. "Who is he?" Ethan asked, pointing at the austere figure of a middle-aged man, dressed in an expensive suit with the saddest eyes they had ever seen. Emma read aloud, stumbling over a few words. "Robert Steele, the loneliest billionaire in the city." "A billionaire?" Evan exclaimed, his eyes wide. "What's a billionaire?" "Someone very, very rich," Ethan explained, recalling a school lesson. "Richer than we can imagine." Emma continued reading. "Robert Steele, known as the Ice King in business circles, will spend another Christmas alone in his mansion." The triplets looked at one another, a silent understanding passing between them. How could someone so rich be so lonely? How could anyone choose to spend Christmas alone? "He looks so sad," Emma whispered, gently touching the man's face in the picture. Ethan frowned, an idea taking shape in his mind. "You know what? I think I know what we can do this Christmas." Evan, catching his brother's thought, finished his sentence. "We're going to find that mansion." Emma, always the voice of reason, hesitated. "But how? We don't know where it is, and what if we get caught?" Ethan smiled, a determined sparkle in his eyes. "We have the picture, don't we? We can use it as a map. And as for getting caught, well, we're good at hiding, aren't we?" The three huddled together, their faces close, forming a circle of conspiracy. The cold around them seemed to melt in the warmth of their growing enthusiasm. "But what will we do when we get there?" Emma asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Evan, always the dreamer, suggested, "What if we made him a present? Something special, something that will make him smile." Ethan's eyes lit up with approval. "Yes, we'll make the best Christmas gift he's ever received. Something that will melt his heart of ice." Emma, finally convinced, nodded with a smile. "All right, I'm in. But we must be careful and return before anyone notices we're gone." As the sky began to lighten, heralding the arrival of Christmas Eve, the triplets made a silent pact. They would find the lonely billionaire's mansion and somehow bring the Christmas spirit into his life. Little did they know that this impulsive decision, born of compassion and childlike innocence, was about to change not only the lonely billionaire's life, but also their own, in ways they could never have imagined. With the newspaper carefully folded and tucked inside Ethan's coat, the triplets sneaked back to the dormitory, their hearts pounding with the thrill of the adventure to come. As they lay down in their uncomfortable beds, they exchanged knowing glances, aware that this Christmas would be unlike any other. The day had barely begun, and it already promised to be the most extraordinary of their young lives. Steele Mansion rose imposingly against the grey Christmas Eve sky, its dark windows reflecting the softly falling snow. Inside, Robert Steele, the man known as the Ice King, watched the world outside with vacant, distant eyes. At 55, Robert was the embodiment of success in the world's eyes. His financial empire stretched across continents. His name was spoken with reverence in corridors of power. Yet here, alone in his fortress of marble and steel, he was just an empty man, consumed by the bitterness of a life devoted solely to accumulating wealth. His long, pale fingers touched the cold window glass, leaving an ephemeral mark that soon vanished. "Another Christmas," he murmured to himself, his voice hoarse from disuse. There was no expectation in his tone, only a weary resignation. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the empty halls as he headed to his office. The walls, adorned with priceless works of art, seemed to mock his solitude. Every piece, every valuable object, was a silent reminder of the price he had paid for his fortune. Sitting in his leather chair behind the imposing desk, Robert let his mind wander to the past. 25 years ago, he had been a young graduate, full of ambition and dreams. Sarah's face, or his college sweetheart, appeared in his memory, her bright eyes, her warm smile. "You're going to change the world, Rob," she used to say. The memory brought a bitter taste to his mouth. Sarah had been the first casualty of his unbridled ambition. Flashback. "Rob, you missed your mother's birthday again." Sarah's voice was heavy with disappointment. "Understand, Sarah, I'm about to close the biggest deal of my career." "This will put us on the map," Robert argued, his eyes shining with the promise of success. "At what cost, Rob? You barely sleep, you barely eat. We haven't seen our friends in months. This isn't living. It's temporary, love. When we reach the top, we'll have all the time in the world." Sarah's gaze was pure sadness. "But what if, when we get there, there's no one left to share it with?" End of flashback. Robert shook his head, pushing the memory away. Sarah had been right, of course. She always was. When he finally reached the top and he was alone, Sarah had left, unable to compete with his obsession for success. His parents had passed away. His mother's last words, a plea he had not answered to come home. His eyes drifted to the framed photo on his desk, the only sentimental concession in the entire office. In it, a young Robert smiled beside his mentor, old Mr. Thompson. "Remember, kid," Mr. Thompson's voice echoed in his mind. "True success isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch." Robert laughed bitterly. What a cruel joke fate had played. He, who once dreamed of making a difference, was now known only for his coldness and ruthless efficiency in business. The shrill sound of the telephone interrupted his grim thoughts. It was his assistant, the only person bold, or perhaps foolish, enough to call on Christmas Eve. "Mr. Steele," Jennifer's hesitant voice sounded over the line. "I just wanted to confirm that you won't need anything for the holiday." "No, Jennifer. As always, I'll spend Christmas working. Enjoy your time off." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, if I may, my family would be honored to have you over for Christmas dinner. No one should spend the holidays alone." For a moment, a spark of something, perhaps gratitude, perhaps longing, flickered in Robert's chest. But it was quickly smothered by the habit of a lifetime of isolation. "That won't be necessary, Jennifer. Merry Christmas." He hung up before she could reply, ignoring the knot forming in his throat. Standing, Robert walked over to the bar in the corner of the office. The whiskey, a 50-year-old single malt, more expensive than many employees' annual salaries, poured smoothly into the crystal glass. He watched the amber liquid, wondering how many Christmases he had spent exactly like this, alone with only alcohol for company. Outside, the lights of neighboring houses began to glow, families gathering to celebrate. Robert drew the curtains shut with a sharp movement, unable to bear the sight of other people's happiness. Returning to his desk, he turned on the computer, determined to bury himself in work. There was always more money to be made, more companies to acquire, more empires to build. Work was his refuge, his fortress against the emotions that threatened to consume him. As the numbers danced on the screen before him, Robert vaguely wondered when he had lost the ability to feel joy. Perhaps it had been gradual, each cold business decision freezing a part of his heart until nothing but ice remained. Hours passed, the sky darkening outside. The only sounds in the mansion were the soft ticking of an old clock and the occasional clink of ice in Robert's glass. Not even the staff was present. He had given them time off for the holidays, not out of generosity, but because he couldn't stand having others around on this day. As midnight approached, Robert finally stepped back from the computer. His eyes were red and tired, but his face remained a mask of indifference. Walking to the large window, he opened the curtains again. The snow had stopped falling, and the full moon bathed the garden in an ethereal light. For a brief moment, Robert felt something, a twinge of what? Regret, loneliness, a longing for something more. But as quickly as it came, the feeling vanished, leaving only the familiar emptiness in its place. "Merry Christmas, Robert," he murmured to himself, his voice echoing in the empty room. As he prepared for another lonely night, Robert had no idea that a few miles away, 3 small hearts were beating with the anticipation of an adventure that would forever change his life. Fate, it seems, had other plans for the ice-hearted billionaire this Christmas. And so, in the stillness of his mansion, surrounded by unimaginable riches but devoid of human warmth, Robert Steele fell asleep, unaware that dawn would bring not just a new day, but the possibility of a new beginning. The dormitory at Hope Orphanage came alive with the first rays of the Christmas morning sun. Ethan, Emma, and Evan were awake long before the others, their eyes shining with excitement over their secret plan. "So what are we going to give Mr. Lonely Billionaire?" Evan whispered, his voice barely able to contain his excitement. Emma bit her lip, thoughtful. "It has to be something special, something that will make him smile." Ethan, always the strategist, pondered for a moment. "Remember Mrs. Miller? She always said the best gifts come from the heart." The triplets fell silent for a moment, recalling the kind volunteer who used to visit the orphanage, bringing stories and warm hugs. She had left the year before, leaving a void no one had been able to fill. "That's it," Emma exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "Let's make something that shows Mr. Steele he's not alone, that someone cares." Evan nodded eagerly. "We can make a card, with drawings and messages. And maybe add some special things," Ethan suggested. "Things that mean something to us." With a plan in mind, the triplets set to work. Quietly, they gathered materials from all over the orphanage, scraps of colored paper from old school projects, worn crayons, and even a piece of ribbon Emma had saved from a rare birthday present. Hidden in a corner of the courtyard, the 3 worked feverishly. Emma drew a vibrant Christmas tree, her artistic skills turning the worn pencils into a lively masterpiece. Evan wrote a message in his careful, childlike handwriting. No one should spend Christmas alone. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Steele." Ethan, in turn, searched through his few belongings for something special to add. At the bottom of his drawer, he found a small wooden angel that Mrs. Miller had given him. "To protect you," she had said. With a lump in his throat, he decided Mr. Steele needed that protection more than he did. While the triplets worked, across the city, Robert Steele was waking up in his solitary mansion. The oppressive silence of the house immediately enveloped him, like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Against his will, Robert found himself walking to the window. Pulling back the curtains, he watched the world outside, covered in a mantle of pristine snow. Children passed by, laughing and playing, their joyful voices echoing on the quiet street. For a brief moment, something stirred in Robert's chest. A long-dormant curiosity, a nearly forgotten desire for connection. He caught himself wondering what it would be like to go out, feel the snow under his feet, hear the laughter up close. Shaking his head to banish these unusual thoughts, Robert stepped away from the window, but the seed of curiosity had been planted. a small crack in the wall of ice around his heart. Back at the orphanage, the triplets were putting the finishing touches on their gift. Emma had turned an old shoebox into a festive container, covering it with scraps of red and green paper. "It's almost ready," Ethan said, carefully placing the wooden angel in the box. "We just need one more thing." Evan looked at his brother, intrigued. "What's that?" With a mysterious smile, Ethan pulled 3 smooth stones from his pocket. "Remember when we went to the river last summer? I kept these stones. One for each of us." Emma picked up one of the stones, tears welling in her eyes. "They're beautiful, Ethan." "Let's put them in the box," Evan suggested, "so a part of us will be with Mr. Steele." With reverence, each of the triplets placed their stone inside the box. It was a simple gesture, but one filled with meaning. These stones represented their hopes, their dreams, the strength of their bond. "Done," Emma said, carefully closing the box. "Do you think he'll like it?" Ethan smiled, hugging his siblings. "He'll love it. And if he doesn't, well, at least he'll know someone cares about him this Christmas." As the triplets finished their gift, Robert Steele struggled with growing restlessness in his mansion. His eyes kept drifting back to the window, to the world beyond his walls. Finally, giving in to an impulse he couldn't explain, Robert donned his coat and stepped into the garden. The cold air stung his face, the snow crunching under his expensive shoes. For a moment, he stood still, uncertain, as if he had forgotten how to simply exist outside the sterile comfort of his routine. A sound caught his attention, distant laughter, the jingle of bells. Robert found himself walking toward the gate, his fingers touching the cold metal bars. On the other side, the street was alive with Christmas cheer. For a fleeting moment, Robert felt an overwhelming urge to open the gate, to join that world of color and sound. But fear, of what, he wasn't sure, kept him paralyzed. Returning inside, Robert sat in his favorite armchair, a glass of whiskey trembling slightly in his hand. What was happening to him? Why, after so many years, did he suddenly care about what lay beyond his walls? Unbeknownst to him, a few miles away, 3 small hearts beat with anticipation. The gift they had created with so much love and care was about to begin a journey that would change not only Robert Steele's life, but their own. As the afternoon wore on, the triplets prepared for their mission. With the gift carefully hidden, they exchanged determined glances. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked, his voice barely concealing his excitement. Emma and Evan nodded, their faces a mixture of fear and anticipation. "Then let's go," said Ethan. "Let's bring a bit of Christmas to Mr. Steele." And so, with hearts full of hope and a shoebox turned into a treasure of love, the triplets set off on an adventure that would change their lives forever. Destiny awaited them in the form of an imposing mansion and a lonely man whose frozen heart was about to experience the warmth of true Christmas spirit. The winter sun had barely begun to warm the snow-covered streets when Ethan, Emma, and Evan slipped through the rusted gates of Hope Orphanage. Their hearts pounded, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through their veins. "Remember," Ethan whispered, holding his siblings' hands firmly, "we have to be quick and quiet like cats." Emma clutched the gift box to her chest, protecting it as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. "What if we get lost?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Evan, always the optimist, grinned confidently. "We won't get lost. We have the photo. Remember, it's like a magic map." The 3 stopped at the corner, and Ethan carefully pulled the crumpled newspaper from his worn coat pocket. The picture of Robert Steele's mansion, though slightly blurred by dampness, was still clearly visible. "Look," Emma pointed. "You can see the mountains in the background. It must be in that direction." With a goal in mind, the triplets began their journey. The city, normally an intimidating maze of streets and buildings, felt different on this Christmas morning. Festive decorations adorned windows, and the aroma of freshly baked bread and sweets lingered in the air, making their empty stomachs rumble. They passed through snow-covered parks, where other children played without a care, building snowmen and making snow angels. For a moment, the triplets felt a pang of envy, wishing they could join in the carefree fun. But they had an important mission to accomplish. As they walked on, the houses grew larger and more imposing. Well-kept gardens gave way to sprawling lawns and elaborate gates. Evan gazed in wonder at a frozen fountain, its ice sparkling like diamonds in the winter sun. "Wow," he murmured. "The people who live here must be really happy." Ethan frowned, remembering the sad expression on Mr. Steele's face in the newspaper photo. "Not always, Evan. Sometimes, the biggest houses can be the emptiest." Meanwhile, miles away, Robert Steele was restless in his mansion. After a poorly slept night, he found himself drawn once more to the window, watching the world outside with a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. Families passed by on the street, parents holding the hands of smiling children, elderly couples strolling slowly, enjoying the beauty of the day. Robert watched a father teach his son to ride a new bicycle, likely a Christmas present. The boy's radiant smile, once he managed to pedal on his own, made something inside Robert ache painfully. Why was he feeling like this? Why, after so many years of self-imposed isolation, did he suddenly care about what was happening beyond his walls? Turning abruptly, Robert grabbed his coat and headed back to the garden. The cold air filled his lungs, bringing distant sounds of laughter and conversation. He walked up to the gate, his fingers brushing the iron bars. Across the street, a young mother passed by pushing a stroller. She looked at Robert and smiled, waving cheerfully. "Merry Christmas," she called out. Robert froze, unable to respond. How long had it been since anyone greeted him this way, with a genuine smile and no hidden motives? Back on the triplets' journey, they faced their own challenges. The streets became increasingly confusing, and the newspaper photo was at best an imperfect guide. "I think we're lost," Emma admitted, tears of frustration welling up in her eyes. Ethan looked around, trying to remain calm for his siblings. "We're not lost," he insisted, though his voice betrayed uncertainty. "We just don't know exactly where we are." That was when Evan spotted something. "Look, that tree over there. Isn't it the same one as in the photo?" The three ran up to the imposing tree, its snow-covered branches gleaming in the sun. Comparing it to the picture, they saw that Evan was right. It was the very same tree seen behind Steele Mansion. Renewed hope spurred them onward. The path led through increasingly exclusive streets, until finally they turned a corner and there it was, Steele Mansion in all its intimidating glory. The triplets stopped, jaws dropping. The house was even larger and more imposing than in the photo. Tall walls surrounded it, and a lavish gate blocked the entrance. "Now what?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan studied the gate, his young face creased in concentration. "There must be a doorbell or something like that. Let's take a look." Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Robert had returned to his office but couldn't concentrate. His thoughts kept drifting back to the happy families outside and the friendly smile of the young mother. He found himself thinking of past Christmases, times when the mansion was filled with laughter and warmth. When was the last time he truly celebrated Christmas? When he truly felt the joy of the season? An unexpected sound tore him from his thoughts, the ring of the gate's doorbell. Robert frowned, puzzled. Who could it be? He wasn't expecting anyone, and his staff was off for the holiday. Curious and slightly apprehensive, he moved to the security monitor. The image that greeted him left him astonished. 3 small faces stared at the camera, their big eyes filled with hope and a hint of fear. One of them, a girl with messy braids, held a colorful box in her arms. For a long moment, Robert just stared at the monitor, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. Who were these children? What did they want? More importantly, why did he suddenly feel so alive? With a trembling hand, Robert reached for the intercom button. It was time to find out what fate had brought to his door this Christmas. The metallic sound of the intercom made the triplets jump in fright. The voice that emerged was deep and hesitant, as if unused to being heard. "Who are you? What do you want?" Ethan, Emma, and Evan exchanged nervous glances. Ethan usually spoke for them, but this time, Emma stepped forward, clutching the gift box to her chest. "Mr. Steele," she asked, her small voice determined, We brought you a Christmas present." Inside the mansion, Robert Steele froze, his hand still on the intercom button. A present. For him. From 3 unknown children. His rational mind screamed that this was absurd, probably some kind of trick, but another part of him, a part he thought long dead, felt an irresistible curiosity. After what felt like an eternity, Robert's voice sounded again through the intercom. "Wait there." The triplets barely had time to exchange surprised looks before the imposing gate began to open with a creak. Hesitantly, they took their first steps inside the property. The path leading to the mansion was long, winding through an impeccably manicured garden now blanketed in snow. Majestic trees, their branches heavy with snow, lined the way. On any other day, the triplets would have marveled at the beauty of the place, but at that moment, their hearts pounded too loudly with fear and excitement to notice much else. As they approached the house, they saw a solitary figure standing in the doorway. Robert Steele was even more imposing in person than he had appeared in the newspaper photo. Tall and lean, dressed in an impeccable suit despite it being Christmas morning, he watched them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. When the triplets finally reached the steps leading to the entrance, they stopped, gazing up at the man who seemed like a towering figure above them. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence was so dense they could hear the soft tinkling of snowflakes falling around them. It was Robert who finally broke the silence. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice gentler now, almost uncertain. How do you know who I am?" Ethan stepped forward, summoning all his courage. "I'm Ethan, sir. These are my siblings, Emma and Evan. We saw your picture in the newspaper." Robert frowned, confused. "The newspaper? Which newspaper?" Emma, still holding the gift box, explained. "An old newspaper we found. It said you were the loneliest billionaire in the city." The words hit Robert like a punch to the gut. He remembered that article, published months ago. At the time, he dismissed it as sensational journalism, but hearing those words from a child's mouth somehow made it all more real. "And you came all the way here because of that?" Robert asked, his voice betraying a mixture of disbelief and something else, something he couldn't name. Evan, the youngest, smiled shyly. "No one should be alone at Christmas, Mr. Steele." Robert felt something break inside him. It was as if those simple words had found a crack in the armor he had so carefully built. Looking at the 3 hopeful faces before him, Robert found himself at a crossroads. His entire adult life had been built around keeping people at a distance, shielding himself from disappointment and betrayal. But here were these children, offering him something he didn't even know he still wanted: connection. Would you like to come in?" The words slipped out of his mouth before he could think better of it. The triplets' eyes widened in surprise and delight. They exchanged quick, excited looks before eagerly nodding. As he guided the children inside, Robert watched them, surprised at himself. Their coats were old and patched, their gloves had holes, and their shoes were clearly worn. Still, there was a light in their eyes, a joy that seemed to defy their circumstances. The mansion, usually so silent and cold, suddenly seemed to come alive with the children's presence. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floors. Their whispered voices filled the air with an energy Robert hadn't felt in years. He led them to the main living room, a grand space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the snowy garden. The triplets looked around in awe, their eyes scanning the expensive paintings, the elegant furniture, the immense Christmas tree in the corner, perfectly decorated, yet somehow cold and lifeless. "It's so beautiful," Emma whispered, her eyes shining. Robert observed the children, feeling a strange mix of pride and shame. Pride for what he had built, shame for how empty it all seemed now. "Mr. Steele," Ethan's voice brought him back to the present. We made this for you." Emma stepped forward, extending the colorful box she carried. Robert took it with hesitant hands, surprised by its unexpected weight. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "It's a Christmas present," Evan replied, smiling. "Made especially for you." Robert looked at the box in his hands, then at the hopeful faces of the children. Something inside him, something he thought long gone, began to thaw. Thank you," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. In that moment, Watching these three children who had crossed the city to bring a little joy to a stranger, Robert Steele felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Whatever was inside that box, he knew he had already received the true gift, the reminder that even in the coldest heart, there might still be room for the warmth of Christmas. Robert Steele stared at the colorful box in his hands, feeling a swirl of emotions he couldn't name. The silence in the room was palpable, broken only by the gentle tinkling of Christmas ornaments on the immense tree, stirred by an invisible draft. Would you like to sit down?" Robert asked, surprised at the odd sound of his own voice. It had been years since he'd invited anyone to make themselves comfortable in this room. The triplets nodded timidly, settling onto the expensive leather sofa. They looked tiny there, their feet barely touching the floor. Robert took a seat in the armchair opposite them, the gift box still in his lap. "So," he began hesitantly, "you mentioned an orphanage." Emma was the first to speak, her voice gentle but steady. "Yes, Mr. Steele. We've lived at Hope Orphanage since we were babies." "Since babies?" Robert couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. "And your parents?" Ethan shrugged, a gesture too mature for his age. "We don't know anything about them." "Mrs. Thompson, the director at the orphanage, said we were left at the door when we were just a few days old." Robert felt a pang in his chest. Children abandoned, alone in the world from the start. Why did this affect him so deeply? What is it like, living there? He found himself asking, genuine curiosity in his voice. The triplets exchanged looks, as if deciding where to begin. This time, Evan spoke, his face lighting up with a smile. "Sometimes it's harder," he admitted, "but we have each other. And there are good moments too, like when Mrs. Miller used to visit." "Mrs. Miller?" Robert inquired. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "She was a volunteer. She came every week to read us stories and give us hugs. She said hugs are the best medicine for sad hearts." Robert felt something tighten in his throat. When was the last time someone hugged him? When was the last time he allowed such closeness? "What happened to her?" he asked softly. Emma's smile faded. She got sick. She couldn't come anymore. We miss her a lot." A heavy silence fell over the room. Robert found himself thinking of his own childhood, of memories long buried. "You know," he began, surprised by his own willingness to share, "when I was about your age, I spent some time in a place like that too." The triplets' eyes widened in surprise. "You were an orphan too?" Ethan asked, incredulous. Robert shook his head. "Not exactly, my father. He left when I was very young. My mother got sick and couldn't take care of me. I spent 2 years in a temporary home." Memories flowed now, like a long-dammed river. "It was a cold place, not so different from what you described, but there was a lady there, Mrs. Hawkins. She always found time for every child, no matter how busy she was." Robert lost himself in thought for a moment. Mrs. Hawkins, with her floral apron, always smelling of freshly baked cookies. The way she ruffled his hair and called him "my little businessman" when she caught him trading toys with other kids. "She taught me that kindness isn't weakness," Robert continued softly. "That caring for others doesn't diminish who you are, but makes you stronger." He looked at the triplets, seeing in their attentive faces the reflection of his younger self. When had he forgotten those lessons? "What happened after that, Mr. Steele?" Emma asked gently. Robert took a deep breath. "My mother got better. She came to get me and we went home, but things were never the same. I was determined never to be vulnerable again, never to depend on anyone." Ethan frowned, thoughtful. "But isn't that very lonely?" The question struck Robert like lightning. Lonely? Yes, that was exactly what he was. Lonely by choice, isolated by fear. "Sometimes," he admitted, surprised at his own honesty, "sometimes it's very lonely." Evan, the youngest, slipped off the sofa and approached Robert. With a courage born of innocence, he placed his small hand on the billionaire's. "It doesn't have to be that way, Mr. Steele," he said, with the simple wisdom of a child. "No one should be alone, especially at Christmas." Robert looked down at that tiny hand on his, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. It was as if a wall inside him was starting to crumble. "You children are very special," he said, his voice thick with emotion. How do you keep this hope alive, this kindness?" Emma smiled, a smile that lit up the entire room. "It's easy when you have people by your side. We have each other, and now we have you too." Robert felt tears fill his eyes. When was the last time he cried? He couldn't remember. "Thank you," he whispered, not trusting his voice to say more. In that moment, looking at these three children who had crossed the city to bring light into his darkness, Robert Steele felt something awaken inside him. A spark of something he thought he had lost long ago. Compassion. He looked at the box in his lap, then back at the hopeful faces of the triplets. With trembling hands, he began to unwrap the present, feeling as if he were unwrapping not just a box, but his own long-shut heart. Whatever was inside that box, Robert knew he had already received the greatest gift of all, the reminder of his own humanity. And with that memory came the promise of a new beginning, of a Christmas that might mark not the end of his loneliness, but the start of a new journey. Robert Steele gazed at the colorful box in his hands, feeling the weight of the children's expectations as they watched him intently. His fingers, accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts and manipulating corporate destinies, now trembled slightly as they touched the improvised wrapping paper. "You really made this for me?" he asked, his voice a mix of skepticism and an unnamed emotion. Emma nodded eagerly. "Yes, Mr. Steele. We spent all night working on it." Robert raised an eyebrow. The idea that someone, let alone three orphaned children, would go to such trouble to create something especially for him was unsettling. Part of him, hardened by years of ruthless business, whispered that this must be a trick, but another part, one he had buried long ago, yearned to believe in their sincerity. With a deep sigh, Robert began to unwrap the present. The paper fell away under his fingers, revealing a shoebox decorated with scraps of colored paper and childish drawings. "It's a treasure box," Evan explained, his eyes shining with excitement. "Filled with special things." Robert opened the lid slowly, uncertain what to expect. The first thing he saw was a handmade card. On the cover was a brightly colored Christmas tree, surprisingly well drawn for a child. "I drew it," Emma said timidly. "I hope you like it." Robert opened the card, his eyes taking in the words written in careful, childish handwriting. "No one should spend Christmas alone. Merry Christmas, Mr. Steele." Something stirred in Robert's chest, an emotion he hadn't felt in so long he barely recognized it. Gratitude. "It's very beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough. Encouraged by his reaction, the triplets leaned closer, eager to show him the rest of the box's contents. "Look, Mr. Steele," said Ethan, pointing inside the box. "There's more." Robert reached into the box, his fingers finding something small and smooth. He pulled it out, revealing a tiny wooden angel. "That was my lucky charm," Ethan explained, his voice growing serious. "Mrs. Miller gave it to me. She said it was to protect me, but I thought you needed it more than I do now." Robert looked at the small angel in his hand, feeling the weight of the gesture behind it. A child, who had so little, giving something so precious. "Ethan, I can't accept this," he began, but the boy interrupted him. "Please, Mr. Steele, I want you to have it so you know you're not alone." The words hit Robert like a punch in the stomach. He felt something warm and wet in his eyes, tears. Swallowing hard, he continued exploring the box. His fingers found 3 smooth stones. "These are our lucky stones," Emma explained. "We got them at the river last summer, one for each of us." "And now they're yours too," Evan added. Robert held the stones in his hand, feeling their smooth texture. Something inside him began to crack, like thin ice under pressure. The last item in the box was a piece of red ribbon, worn but carefully folded. "That's the ribbon from the only birthday present I ever got," Emma said softly. "I kept it all these years. I wanted you to have something really special." It was the final straw. Robert felt something shatter inside him, a dam of long repressed emotions finally giving way. Tears, hot and unexpected, started rolling down his cheeks. He hadn't cried like this since when? Since his mother's death, since Sarah left him. He couldn't remember. "Mr. Steele," Evan's worried voice brought him back. Are you okay?" Robert looked at the three children before him, their faces a blend of concern and hope. How could he explain what he was feeling? How could he express the impact this simple gesture had on him? I'm fine," he began, his voice choked. "It's just that no one has ever done something like this for me before." Emma approached, placing a hesitant hand on Robert's arm. "Don't cry, Mr. Steele. It's Christmas. It should be a happy day." Robert let out a laugh, interrupted by sobs. "Ah, Emma, sometimes people cry when they're happy too." It was true. For the first time in years, decades maybe, Robert Steele felt truly happy. Not the fleeting satisfaction of closing a major deal or acquiring a new luxury item, but a deep, genuine happiness born of human connection and selfless kindness. He looked at the items in his hands, the card, the angel, the stones, the ribbon, simple gifts with no monetary value, yet laden with meaning money could never buy. "You three," he said, his voice trembling but firm, "you've given me far more than a gift today. You've reminded me of what it means to be human." The triplets smiled, their faces glowing with the joy of having reached the heart of the lonely billionaire. In that moment, seated in his luxurious yet empty mansion, surrounded by three orphaned children who had so little yet gave so much, Robert Steele felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for him. That perhaps he could learn to open his heart again, to connect, to care. And as tears continued to fall, washing away years of bitterness and solitude, Robert made a silent promise to himself and to the three children before him. This Christmas would not mark the end of his journey, but the beginning of a new one, a journey of redemption, of connection, of life. The Ice King was finally beginning to melt. The silence in the room was broken only by Robert Steele's restrained sobs. The man who for decades had been known as the Ice King now found himself disarmed, his carefully constructed defenses crumbling before three small strangers and their simple yet deeply meaningful gifts. Robert looked at his hands, still holding the wooden angel, the smooth river stones, and the worn red ribbon. His vision was blurred by tears, an unfamiliar sensation after so many dry years. I don't understand," he murmured, more to himself than to the children. "Why does this affect me so much?" Emma, the most empathetic of the triplets, approached cautiously. With a kindness that pinched Robert's heart, she placed her small hand over his. "It's okay to cry, Mr. Steele," she said softly. "Mrs. Miller always said that tears wash the soul." Robert raised his eyes, meeting Emma's compassionate gaze. How could a child who barely knew him offer so much comfort? Ethan, always the protector, stepped forward. "You don't have to be sad. We're here now." "Yeah," added Evan, his radiant smile lighting up the room. "And we can come back whenever you want." Evan's innocent, genuine offer was too much for Robert. Another wave of tears escaped, and he found himself doing something he hadn't done in decades. He opened his arms. Without hesitation, the triplets rushed forward, embracing Robert as a group. The contrast could not have been greater. The tall, imposing man in his expensive suit, embraced by three small children in worn clothes. Robert closed his eyes, letting himself be enveloped by the warmth and innocence of that hug. The scent of fresh snow and cheap soap coming from the children was so different from the expensive perfumes he was used to, yet somehow it felt more real, more right. "You are amazing, do you know that?" Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "You crossed the city on Christmas Day to bring a gift to a stranger. Why?" The triplets pulled back a little, looking at Robert with a mix of confusion and certainty. "Because no one should be alone at Christmas," Ethan answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And because you looked sad in the newspaper picture," Emma added. "And because giving presents is fun," Evan concluded with a mischievous grin. Robert couldn't help but laugh, a rusty sound that felt strange even to his own ears. When was the last time he had laughed like this, truly? "You are very special," he said, wiping away tears with the back of his hand. "You know that, right?" The triplets exchanged shy glances, a bit embarrassed by the compliment. "We just did what we thought was right," said Ethan, shrugging. Robert shook his head, amazed at the simplicity and depth of that response. Doing what's right. When had he forgotten that basic principle? "You have given me much more than a present today," Robert said, his voice growing firmer. "You reminded me of things I had long forgotten." "What things, Mr. Steele?" Emma asked curiously. Robert thought for a moment, trying to put into words the whirlwind of emotions he felt. "Well, you reminded me that there is kindness in the world, that sometimes the simplest things are the most valuable. And that—" he paused, swallowing hard. "That maybe it's not too late to change." The triplets smiled, their faces lit by the joy of having made a difference. "It's never too late to change, Mr. Steele," said Ethan, with a wisdom beyond his years. "Mrs. Miller always said that every day is a new chance to be better." Robert nodded, feeling the weight of those words. Every day is a new chance. How many chances had he squandered over the years? "You are very wise for such young children," he commented, a genuine smile forming on his lips. "That's because we have each other," Emma replied simply. "We always take care of one another." Her answer struck Robert like a bolt of lightning. Taking care of each other. When was the last time he truly cared for someone besides himself? Looking at the hopeful faces before him, Robert felt something awakening inside him, a long dormant desire to make a difference, to be more than just a rich and powerful man. "Would you," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "would you like to spend Christmas with me?" The triplets' eyes widened in surprise and excitement. "Really?" Evan exclaimed, practically jumping with joy. "But what about the orphanage?" Ethan asked, always the most responsible. Robert felt a pang of guilt. Of course, the orphanage. How could he have forgotten? "Don't worry," he said, a new determination in his voice. "I'll call the orphanage and explain everything. And then we can think about how to make this the best Christmas ever." The children squealed with delight, hugging Robert once again. This time, he did not hesitate to return the embrace, feeling as if something inside him was finally healing. As he watched the triplets excitedly discuss their plans for the day, Robert reflected on how quickly his life had changed. Just hours ago, he was a lonely, bitter man, resigned to spending yet another Christmas in solitude. Now, he was surrounded by laughter and expectation, his heart full of an emotion he barely recognized: hope. The tears still shining in his eyes were no longer of sadness or confusion. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of a man finally waking up from a long, cold, emotional winter. Robert Steele, the Ice King, was melting, and in place of the cold, distant man he had been for so long, something new was emerging, something warmer, more alive, more human. As he rose to make the call to the orphanage, Robert made a silent promise to himself and the three children who had brought light into his darkness. This Christmas would mark not just the end of his loneliness, but the beginning of a new journey. A journey of redemption, of connection, of life. And for the first time in many years, Robert Steele was eager to see where this path would lead him. The aroma of hot chocolate filled the Steele mansion's kitchen, a vast, immaculate space rarely used. Robert, sleeves rolled up and an apron over his expensive suit, stirred a pot on the stove, while the triplets watched from high stools around the central island. "I never thought I'd see the day when Mr. Steele made hot chocolate," Emma commented, her eyes shining with admiration. Robert laughed softly, a sound becoming more frequent by the minute. "To be honest, Emma, neither did I." After the call to the orphanage, a surprisingly easy conversation, helped by the generous donation Robert promised, he decided it was time to make his mansion a bit more welcoming for his young guests. "You know," Robert began as he poured the chocolate into 4 mugs, "the last time I made hot chocolate was with my mother, many years ago." "Really?" Ethan asked, accepting his mug with a whispered thanks. "What was your mother like, Mr. Steele?" Robert paused, memories he had long avoided surfacing. "She was incredible. She always smiled, no matter how hard things got. And they got hard many times." He sat down with the triplets, cradling his mug in both hands. "After my father left, she worked 2 jobs to support us. Still, she always found time for me." "What happened to her?" Evan asked gently. Robert felt a knot in his throat. She got sick when I was about 12. That's when I spent time in that temporary home. The triplets listened intently, their eyes full of understanding beyond their years. When she got better and I returned home, I promised myself we would never be poor again, Robert continued, that we would never depend on anyone's kindness. Emma tilted her head, thoughtful. But the kindness of strangers isn't a bad thing, Mr. Steele. Look at us. Robert couldn't help but smile. You're right, Emma. I suppose I forgot that along the way. What happened next? Ethan asked, clearly engrossed in the story. Robert took a deep breath. I focused on my studies, earned a scholarship to a good university. I worked hard, very hard. And when I graduated, he paused, remembering the ambitious young man he once was. Well, I had big dreams. I wanted to change the world, make a difference. And did you? Evan asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Robert felt a pang of regret. Not in the way I expected, Evan. I built an empire, it's true. I made more money than I ever dreamed. But in the process, he looked at the 3 children in front of him, their attentive and compassionate faces. In the process, I think I lost sight of what really mattered. What matters, Mr. Steele? Emma asked softly. Robert felt his eyes fill with tears again. This, Emma, connection, compassion, making a difference in people's lives, not just in business. A moment of reflective silence followed, broken only by the soft clinking of spoons in their mugs. You know, Ethan began hesitantly. At the orphanage, we learned that family isn't just who shares your blood, it's who cares about you, who's there in the hard times. Robert nodded, feeling the weight of those words. You are very wise, Ethan. I had a family like that once. Friends, colleagues who cared about me, but over the years you pushed them away, Emma completed gently. Yes, Robert admitted, surprised at his own honesty. I thought I didn't need them, that being successful meant being self-sufficient. Evan placed his small hand over Robert's again. But no one has to be self-sufficient all the time, Mr. Steele. That's why we have each other. Robert felt his heart clench at the simplicity and depth of that statement. How could these children, who had so little, understand so well what truly mattered? You're right, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I lost my way over the years. But maybe it's not too late to change. The triplets smiled, their faces shining with hope. It's never too late to change, Mr. Steele, Emma said. Mrs. Miller always said that each new day is a chance to start over. Robert chuckled softly. This Mrs. Miller sounds like a very wise woman. She was, Ethan agreed. She taught us that even when things seem difficult, there's always hope. And that the best gifts aren't things, but moments, Evan added. Robert looked around the kitchen, at the mugs of hot chocolate tea, the triplets' smiling faces. This moment, he realized, was more precious than any luxury item in his mansion. How you know? He began, feeling a surge of determination. I have resources that could make a big difference, not just for you, but for many children like you. The triplets' eyes widened. What do you mean, Mr. Steele? Ethan asked. Robert smiled, feeling more alive than he had in years. I mean that maybe it's time to use my wealth for something truly meaningful, to help children like you have the opportunities you deserve. Emma clapped her hands excitedly. How you mean like improving the orphanage? Not just improving, Robert said, his mind already working through the possibilities, but maybe creating more places like it, places where children can feel safe, loved, where they can learn and grow. The triplets exchanged looks of amazement and joy. You'd do that? Evan asked, his voice barely containing his emotion. Robert nodded, feeling a certainty he hadn't felt in a long time. Yes, Evan, and I'd like your help. You know better than anyone what children like you need. The children squealed with joy, jumping off their stools to hug Robert. He wrapped his arms around them, surprised by a wave of affection that caught him off guard. In that moment, Robert Steele knew his life would never be the same. The Ice King had melted completely, replaced by a man rediscovered, filled with purpose and compassion. As they excitedly planned the future, Robert found himself thinking of his mother. What would she say if she could see him now? He had a feeling she would be smiling, proud of the man he was finally becoming. Christmas, he realized, did not just mark the birth of Christ, but could also mark the rebirth of a man. And thanks to 3 unexpected little angels, Robert Steele was being reborn, his heart opening up to a world of possibilities he'd forgotten existed. Steele Mansion, once a monument to loneliness and cold success, now vibrated with an energy it hadn't felt in decades. Children's laughter echoed in the marble halls, blending with the gentle clink of silverware and the soft sound of Christmas songs. Robert Steele watched the scene before him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. The triplets, Ethan, Emma, and Evan, sat at the immense dining table, eagerly devouring the meal he had ordered at the last minute from one of the city's finest restaurants. "Mr. Steele, Dad," Emma called, catching herself mid-sentence. "This is better than anything we've ever eaten at the orphanage." Robert felt a pang in his chest. The children's genuine joy over something as simple as a good meal made him question all his priorities of the last few years. "I'm glad you like it," he replied softly. "But tell me, what's the food usually like at the orphanage?" The triplets exchanged looks, as if deciding how much to reveal. Emma finally spoke. "Well, it's not bad. Mrs. Thompson does her best with what we have. But sometimes it's not enough for everyone." Robert's heart tightened. The idea of children going hungry, especially at Christmas, was unbearable. "That's going to change," he said, his voice laced with determination. "I promise you." The children smiled, their eyes shining with a mixture of hope and admiration that made Robert feel both honored and unworthy. After the meal, while the triplets marveled at the TV room, a completely new experience for them, Robert retreated to his office. He sat in his leather chair, eyes drifting over the wall filled with awards and recognitions: Businessman of the Year, Philanthropist of the Year, Innovator of the Decade. Titles that once filled him with pride now felt empty, almost ironic. What kind of philanthropist had he really been, never truly caring about the impact beyond the numbers on a spreadsheet? Robert picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over Jennifer's contact. It was nearly 9 p.m. on Christmas Eve, but he knew she would answer. She always did. Before he could press call, however, a soft knock on the door interrupted him. "Come in," he called, turning to see Ethan standing in the doorway, looking a bit nervous. "Mr. Steele, sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say thank you for everything." Robert motioned for the boy to come closer. "There's nothing to thank me for, Ethan. Actually, I should be thanking you." Ethan tilted his head, confused. "Us? But why?" Robert took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "You reminded me of what really matters in life. You know, Ethan, I spent so many years focused on building my fortune, on being the best, that I forgot how to really live." The boy nodded, a knowing understanding in his eyes. "Mrs. Miller used to say that true wealth lies in the people we love and the lives we touch." Robert felt a lump in his throat. "Your Mrs. Miller was a very wise woman. I wish I had met her." "She would have liked you," Ethan said with a smile. "She always said everyone has kindness inside them. They just need a chance to show it." The words hit Robert like a bolt of lightning. A chance to show kindness. Wasn't that exactly what the triplets had given him today? "Ethan," Robert began, feeling a sudden urgency, "how do you think the other children at the orphanage are spending Christmas?" Ethan's smile faltered a bit. "Probably not as well as we are. Mrs. Thompson always tries to do something special, but with so many kids." Robert nodded, a decision forming in his mind. "What would you say if we visited the orphanage tomorrow?" Ethan's eyes widened with surprise and excitement. "Really? You'd do that?" "Absolutely," Robert replied, feeling a determination he hadn't felt in years. "Actually, I think we can do more than just visit." As he explained his idea to an increasingly enthusiastic Ethan, Robert felt something awaken inside him. A purpose, a desire to truly make a difference that had lain dormant for so long. After Ethan left to share the news with his siblings, Robert turned his attention back to the phone. This time, he didn't hesitate to make the call. "Jennifer, Sorry to bother you so late on Christmas Eve. I need you to arrange a few things for tomorrow." In the hours that followed, Robert worked with renewed energy. Calls were made, plans were drawn, and promises were set. By the time he finished, it was past midnight. Exhausted but strangely invigorated, Robert left his office. Passing by the TV room, he found the triplets asleep on the sofa, bundled up in a pile of blankets they had found. The sight made him pause, a wave of emotion washing over him. Carefully, so as not to wake them, Robert adjusted the blankets around the children. Looking at their peaceful faces, he made a silent promise. "I'll do better," he whispered, "for you and for all children like you. I promise." Returning to his bedroom, Robert stopped by the window. The city outside glowed with Christmas lights, a reminder of hope and renewal. For the first time in years, Robert Steele felt a true connection to the Christmas spirit. It wasn't about expensive gifts or lavish parties. It was about compassion, generosity, and the ability to make a difference in others' lives. Climbing into bed, Robert reflected on the extraordinary day he had just lived, how 3 orphaned children managed, in a matter of hours, to melt the heart of the infamous Ice King. The answer, he realized, was simple. They reminded him of his own humanity, of who he was before the business world hardened him, before the fear of vulnerability isolated him. Robert closed his eyes, his heart filled with a peace he hadn't felt in decades. Tomorrow would be a new day, a day to start correcting the mistakes of the past, to use his wealth and influence to make a real difference. As sleep claimed him, Robert Steele smiled. The Ice King had transformed, melted by the warmth of 3 childlike hearts filled with love and hope. And so, on Christmas Eve, in a mansion that was once a symbol of loneliness but now overflowed with life, a man was reborn. Robert Steele fell asleep not as a lonely billionaire, but as a man with a purpose, eager to embrace a future full of human connections and possibilities. Christmas, he realized, truly was a time of miracles, and the greatest miracle of all was the human heart's ability to change, to open, to love again. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, the newly fallen snow sparkling under the weak winter sun. Robert Steele woke to the sound of children's laughter echoing down the corridors of his mansion, a sound that, only 24 hours before, would have been unimaginable. Dressing quickly, he went downstairs to find Ethan, Emma, and Evan already up, their faces radiant with anticipation. "Good morning, Mr. Steele," they called in unison. "Merry Christmas?" Robert couldn't help but smile. "Merry Christmas, children. Are you ready for our big adventure?" The triplets nodded eagerly, barely containing their excitement. After a quick breakfast, they all climbed into Robert's limousine, headed toward Hope Orphanage. During the ride, Robert watched the city pass by through the window, his thoughts a mix of determination and apprehension. What would he find at the orphanage? How bad would the situation be? When they finally arrived, the reality hit them like a punch in the stomach. Hope Orphanage was a worn-out building, its peeling facade and patched-up windows telling a story of years of neglect and lack of resources. "It's worse than I remembered," Emma murmured, her voice sad. Robert felt his heart ache. How could he have lived in the same city as this place for so many years and never noticed, never cared? They were greeted at the door by a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a tired smile. "Mr. Steele, I'm Martha Thompson, the director. Welcome to Hope Orphanage." Robert shook her hand, noticing the calluses and marks of hard work. "Thank you for having us, Mrs. Thompson, especially on a day like today." Mrs. Thompson shrugged. "Christmas is a day like any other here, Mr. Steele. Our children need care every day of the year." As she led them inside, Robert's shock and discomfort grew. The walls desperately needed painting, the floors were worn, and there were clear signs of mold in some corners. How do you manage in these conditions?" Robert asked, unable to hide his dismay. Mrs. Thompson sighed. "With great difficulty, Mr. Steele. Our funds barely cover the basics. We have dedicated volunteers, but—" She was interrupted by a cry from a nearby room. Rushing to investigate, they found a group of children gathered around a small Christmas tree. A 5-year-old girl sobbed, holding the broken remains of an ornament. "Oh, Lucy." Mrs. Thompson knelt beside the girl, "Don't cry, dear, we can fix it." Robert watched the scene, feeling a mixture of sadness and determination grow inside him. These children deserved so much more than broken ornaments and empty promises. "Mrs. Thompson," he called, his voice firm, "could we speak in private?" In the following minutes, in a small office crowded with papers, Robert listened to the full story of Hope Orphanage. Years of underfunding, constant budget cuts, an increasing number of children in need, all had pushed the institution to a breaking point. "To be honest, Mr. Steele," Mrs. Thompson concluded, her voice heavy with emotion, "I don't know if we can keep the doors open much longer." Her words struck Robert like lightning. The idea that this place, which despite all its shortcomings was still a home to dozens of children, might simply cease to exist was unbearable. "That won't happen," he declared, his voice unexpectedly steady. "Mrs. Thompson, I came here today intending to make a donation, but now I see that wouldn't be enough." The director looked at him, confused. "What do you mean, Mr. Steele?" Robert stood, feeling an energy and purpose he hadn't felt in years. "I mean that I'm going to do more than just make a donation. I'm going to personally commit to saving this orphanage and turning it into the place these children deserve." Mrs. Thompson's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Steele, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Robert replied, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just show me exactly what needs to be done." In the hours that followed, Robert dove headfirst into the orphanage's problems. He examined the finances, inspected every corner of the building, and listened to the stories and needs of every child and staff member. The triplets followed close behind, their faces a mix of pride and admiration. Seeing the man once known as the Ice King care so deeply about the place they called home was almost surreal. As the day wore on, Robert's plan began to take shape. It wouldn't just be about fixing the building or paying overdue bills. He envisioned a complete transformation, new educational programs, medical and psychological support for the children, training and better pay for the staff. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, as they regrouped in her office at the end of the day, "I want to establish a foundation, an organization dedicated not just to saving this orphanage, but to creating a model that can be replicated elsewhere." The director looked at him, stunned. "Mr. Steele, this is incredible, but it's a huge commitment." Robert nodded, feeling the weight of his decision. "I know, and I'm ready to take it on. For too long, I used my wealth only to generate more wealth. It's time to use it to make a real difference." At that moment, Ethan knocked on the door, entering timidly with Emma and Evan. "Mr. Steele, the other children are asking if you'd like to join us for Christmas dinner." Robert looked at the triplets, then back at Mrs. Thompson, his heart filled with an emotion he hadn't felt in decades. Belonging. "I'd be honored," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. As they headed to the dining hall, Robert reflected on the extraordinary journey he had undertaken in the last 24 hours. From a lonely, bitter man, he had transformed into someone with purpose, someone determined to make a difference. The dining hall was decorated with homemade ornaments, a small Christmas tree in the corner, and tables laden with simple yet lovingly prepared food. The room buzzed with excited children, smiling staff and community members who had come to help. Seated there, surrounded by children who had once been strangers, Robert Steele felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt at home. Glancing around at the hopeful faces, children's bright eyes, Mrs. Thompson's grateful look, the pride shining in the triplets' eyes, Robert knew he had found his true calling. The Ice King was gone for good. In his place stood a man determined to bring warmth and hope into the lives of those who needed it most. As the children began singing a Christmas carol, their voices rising in imperfect yet joyful harmony, Robert closed his eyes, letting the music envelop him. This, he realized, was the true spirit of Christmas. Not expensive presents or extravagant parties. It was about compassion, generosity, and the ability to make a difference in others' lives. And right there, in that simple dining hall of an orphanage on the brink of collapse, Robert Steele made a silent promise. He would dedicate the rest of his life to turning the word hope from a mere name into a reality, for every child who crossed this orphanage's threshold. After all, Christmas was about new beginnings, and for Robert Steele, this was just the start of an extraordinary journey. The days following Christmas were a true revolution in Robert Steele's life. The man once known as the Ice King now burned with an inner fire, driven by a purpose that had eluded him for decades. Early the next morning, Robert called an emergency meeting with his executive team. Many were stunned to see their boss, usually so controlled and distant, speaking with overwhelming passion about Hope Orphanage. From today onward, Robert announced, his intense gaze sweeping the conference room, our number one priority will be the revitalization of Hope Orphanage. We will create a foundation, mobilize resources, do whatever it takes. There were murmurs of surprise and some hesitant objections, but Robert was resolute. I know this may seem like a drastic change, he continued, but trust me, this won't just transform lives, it will transform us as a company and as human beings. In the weeks that followed, Robert immersed himself in the project. He practically moved into the orphanage, working side by side with Mrs. Thompson and her team. His hands, once used only for signing million-dollar deals, now grew familiar with paintbrushes, carpentry tools, and to his surprise, warm hugs from grateful children. One day, while painting one of the newly renovated classrooms, Robert heard a giggle behind him. Turning, he saw Emma smiling broadly. "Mr. Steele," she said between laughs, "you have blue paint on your nose." Robert chuckled, a sound that was becoming more natural every day. "Well, Emma, I guess that means I'm really getting involved in the work, doesn't it?" The orphanage children, initially shy around the imposing billionaire, soon warmed up to his constant presence. Robert found himself surrounded by eager little helpers, all anxious to do their part in transforming their home. One particularly busy afternoon, while overseeing the installation of new computers in the brand new computer lab, Robert felt a tug on his sleeve. Looking down, he saw Michael, a 10-year-old boy known for his shyness. "Mr. Steele," Michael asked, hesitant, "can I ask you a question?" Robert knelt down to meet the boy's eyes. "Of course, Michael. What is it?" "Why are you doing all this for us?" Michael asked, his eyes searching Robert's face. "You didn't even know us until a few weeks ago." The question caught Robert by surprise. He took a moment to think before answering. "You know, Michael, sometimes in life we get a chance to do something truly important, something that goes beyond ourselves," he began, choosing his words carefully. "I spent a lot of time thinking only about me, about making more money, about being the best. But I realized that didn't really make me happy." Robert paused, noticing how intently Michael listened, absorbing every word. "What makes me happy now is seeing the smile on your face and on the faces of the other children when you see something new and beautiful here at the orphanage. It's knowing I'm making a difference in your lives. That, Michael, is worth more than all the money in the world." To Robert's surprise, Michael threw his arms around him, hugging him tightly. "Thank you, Mr. Steele," he murmured. "You are making a difference." "Thank you so much." Robert felt tears in his eyes as he returned the hug. In that moment, he knew that no business deal or award he had ever received could compare to this simple gesture of gratitude. As weeks turned into months, the changes at Hope Orphanage were remarkable. The once peeling walls now gleamed with vibrant colors chosen by the children. The library overflowed with new books. The computer room hummed with activity, and the playground, once sad and empty, now boasted bright equipment and a flourishing community garden. But the most surprising transformation was in Robert himself. The man once known for his stern expression and impeccable suits could now be seen laughing openly, sleeves rolled up, often with paint or dirt on his clothes. His assistant, Jennifer, could hardly believe the change. "Mr. Steele," she remarked one day, handing him some documents to sign. "I've never seen you so happy." Robert smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "You know, Jennifer, I think I've never been this happy. I finally feel like I'm doing something that really matters." Word of Robert's actions soon spread throughout the city. Journalists came to cover the story of the Ice King who had melted. Robert, who once avoided the press at all costs, now welcomed them, seizing every opportunity to draw attention to the orphanage's needs and to other similar causes. During an interview for a local newspaper, the reporter asked Robert what had caused this dramatic change in his life. Robert looked toward the playground, where Ethan, Emma, and Evan were playing with other children. "It was a Christmas gift," he replied with a mysterious smile. "A gift that reminded me what truly matters in life." Robert's story and the Hope Orphanage's revival captured the public's imagination. Soon, donations began pouring in from all over the city. Companies offered free services, volunteers appeared in record numbers, and other business owners, inspired by Robert's example, began looking for ways to get involved in social causes. Robert seized the moment to officially launch the Hope Foundation, an organization dedicated not only to supporting Hope Orphanage, but also to creating support programs for disadvantaged children citywide. At an emotional ceremony in the renovated orphanage, Robert gave a passionate speech. "This is just the beginning. Together, we can create a future where every child has the opportunity to grow up in a safe, loving environment full of possibilities." As he spoke, his eyes found the triplets in the crowd. Ethan, Emma, and Evan smiled proudly, tears of joy shining in their eyes. Robert felt his heart fill with a feeling he now recognized without fear: love. In the months that followed, Robert's life became a whirlwind of activity and purpose. He divided his time between managing his businesses and working at the Hope Foundation. But now, instead of spending long, solitary hours in his office, he was constantly surrounded by people, children eager for his attention, dedicated staff, enthusiastic volunteers. One evening, while helping a group of children with their homework in the orphanage's new study room, Robert found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed. He remembered the lonely, bitter man he had been just months before, measuring his worth only in terms of profits and acquisitions. Now, looking at the smiling faces around him, he realized he had found something far more valuable than any material wealth. He had found purpose, community, family. The Ice King had undergone a complete transformation. In his place stood a man who had rediscovered his humanity, his capacity to love and be loved. Robert Steele, once feared and respected in business circles, was now loved and admired by an entire community. As he helped a little girl solve a math problem, his heart overflowing with gratitude and joy, Robert knew with absolute certainty this was true success, true wealth. This was the life he was meant to live. Hope Orphanage glowed under the Christmas lights, unrecognizable compared to the dilapidated building of a year before. The once peeling walls now displayed colorful murals painted by the children themselves. The courtyard, once sad and empty, now teemed with life, a new playground and a thriving community garden. Robert Steele observed the scene with a mixture of pride and disbelief. In just 1 year, not only had the orphanage been transformed, but his own life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. "Mr. Steele, Dad!" Emma's excited voice pulled him from his thoughts. She ran toward him, followed closely by Ethan and Evan. "It's almost time for the Christmas party," Robert smiled, bending down to hug the triplets. The word Dad still sounded new and wonderful to his ears. After months of adoption proceedings, it was finally official. Ethan, Emma, and Evan were his children. "Then we'd better hurry, right?" said Robert, picking Evan up as they walked toward the main hall. The hall was beautifully decorated. A towering Christmas tree dominated the center, adorned with handmade ornaments by the children. Tables around it held festive foods, and the air buzzed with excited anticipation. Mrs. Thompson, now the executive director of the Hope Foundation, approached Robert with a radiant smile. "Robert, I don't know how to thank you for all you've done." Robert shook his head, emotional. "Martha, I'm the one who should be thanking you. You've given me far more than I could ever repay." The party soon went into full swing. Children ran about, their faces lit with pure joy. Staff, volunteers, and community members mingled, united by a spirit of gratitude and hope that filled the air. At a quiet moment, Robert found himself surrounded by a group of teenagers from the orphanage. One of them, a boy named Michael, looked at him with admiration in his eyes. "Mr. Steele?" Michael began. Do you think one day we can be like you? Make a difference like this? Robert felt his heart tighten at the question. He knelt down to eye level with the teenagers. Michael, listen closely, Robert said, his voice soft but firm. Each of you has incredible potential. It doesn't matter where you came from or what challenges you faced. What matters is what you choose to do with the opportunities you have. He paused, looking into each teenager's eyes. But remember, true success isn't measured by the money you earn. It's measured by the difference you make in other people's lives. And all of you, each one of you, is already making that difference. The teenagers smiled, their faces glowing with a new confidence. Robert felt a wave of pride and responsibility. He knew that his role as a mentor to these children was as important as any financial donation he could make. As evening fell, it was time for the gift exchange. Robert watched, heart full, as the children opened their packages with delight. Then, to his surprise, Ethan, Emma, and Evan approached him, carrying a large, wrapped package. "This is for you, Dad," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. With trembling hands, Robert unwrapped the gift. It was a photo album, beautifully decorated. Opening it, he was flooded with images from the past months. He and the children painting walls, reading stories, working in the garden. In every photo, his face shone with a happiness he had never seen in himself before. "We wanted you to see how much you've changed," Emma explained, "and how much you've changed our lives." Robert felt hot tears stream down his cheeks. He pulled the triplets into a tight embrace, at a loss for words to express the depth of his emotion. Standing, Robert asked for everyone's attention. The hall fell silent, all eyes on him. "A year ago," he began, his voice choked with emotion, "I was a very different man. I lived alone, closed off in my own bitterness. I thought success meant having more money, more power." He paused, his eyes finding the triplets. "Then, on Christmas Eve, 3 little angels knocked on my door, and they gave me the greatest gift I have ever received. They reminded me how to love, how to care, how to be human again." Robert extended his hand, and Ethan, Emma, and Evan ran to his side, embracing him. "This last year has been an incredible journey," Robert continued. "I learned that true wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in the smiles of children, in the gratitude of a touched heart, in the joy of making a difference." He looked around, his eyes shining. "I look at all of you and see more than an orphanage. I see a family, our family. And I promise to keep working every day to be worthy of this love and trust you've given me." A thunderous applause erupted, children rushing to hug Robert, adults wiping tears from their eyes. Later, when the party began to calm down, Robert found himself in the courtyard, gazing at the stars. Ethan, Emma, and Evan stood by his side, their small hands holding his. "Merry Christmas, Dad," Evan said softly. Robert smiled, his heart overflowing with love. "Merry Christmas, my little miracles." Standing there, a newly formed family under the starlit sky, Robert Steele reflected on his extraordinary journey. The Ice King had melted completely, giving way to a man filled with warmth, compassion, and purpose. He was no longer alone. He never would be again. And as he embraced his children beneath the twinkling Christmas lights, Robert knew with absolute certainty that this was the life he was meant to live. A life of love, service, family, a true new beginning.